Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and thank you once again for stopping by. This is the third and three relatively short, for me at least, videos. I will link below to the first two for those of you who get brought in by YouTube directly to this particular video, so you'll know what the others have to say. And likewise, they will now also be hooked to this one. So eventually, if I don't get completely confused, all three of them will be interlinked with the others. Now, I've been spending some time and thought, and I wanted really to see Panama take advantage of its location and the facilities it currently has to expand its role as a tech hub in Latin America. Now, it's hard to compete with cities of 8, 10, 12, 15 million people and so forth, because they'll have all sorts of universities and facilities and they're on and on and on. But what we have is excellent connections with the internet, and that we have 7 major undersea cables that run right down the canal, and an 8th one about to be hooked up. I think that's Google's, that's directly meant for Panama. It's really impressive what we have come together, and I was thinking, how could we do this in a way? I'm associated with a number of tech groups and whatever. I just follow them and I talk to them and so on. So I was trying to figure how could we do it, and then up comes this announcement that let's see what does it say? Is that the first data center hub is installed in Panama. Now we have what's called a free trade zone at the Caribbean end of the canal. It is a major center where basically it's storehousing in the past for massive amounts of goods that come through the canal and are left there temporarily before they're moved on to smaller markets in the region. For example, things going to Nicaragua may get dropped off on a ship that's got stuff for 15 countries, and that dropped off at the free trade zone here, and then later it gets moved up to Nicaragua. These centers are set up to make that as easy as possible, and they don't have to pay any taxes or fees. They don't have to pay any taxes to Panama because they're not selling anything in Panama. They're just storing it there temporarily. They pay for the security, they pay for the facilities, and they're very good facilities, temperature, humidity control. I mean, it works. It's big. It's the second largest and the second most active in the world. And only Hong Kong is more active, and who knows, we may catch up with them yet. But in any event, it is. It also provides office space, it's shops and things, all sorts of things there. Now, if you're from outside and you have a passport and you're just a tourist, you can actually visit, and technically speaking, they're all free trade. It's a free trade zone, and they'll sell things to you for a little less than you might have to pay somewhere at home, but that's really pretty chancy. I've gone in to see what it was like and realized I ain't saving much of anything because they want to sell all the really, really expensive stuff. So they give you a discount on that. You end up still spending 3 times as much as you would if you're cheap like me and you're banging it down. But it was interesting to watch. They also provide a lot of office space and all sorts of facilities. Anything you need to run a business, you can run out of the hub. And that's one of the secrets here. And this is one of the reasons why I follow the Argentinians, because of the Venezuelans. And those whom I knew, at least, that's when I was introduced to the concept that they wanted to bring their businesses up and run them from here because they didn't trust running them in Venezuela. They were concerned about what was going to happen to their money, their anything, and plus their families. There was always the threat that the guy who owner would have one of his kids kidnapped, and they have to pay a ransom and all this stuff. It was pretty unpleasant there for quite a while, and this meant that he could run the business, and this is the plan, from up here and have his staff remain there who were not threatened by arrest or kidnapping. Nobody would bother with them, but he could make arrangements to get them paid and everything, and they could run the business for him, but he would be up here. So if the goods were to arrive in Venezuela, but he was not comfortable with sending them down yet, for fear they might be confiscated or there'd be one problem or another, he could have them stored right there at the free trade zone. And then when it was time to move them, he could move them. They wouldn't ever have to set foot in Venezuela. They could be sent on to the client in another country without having to go via Venezuela as they would have before. And that really meant they worked. It worked quite well. The ones people I spoke with at least. They did. They ran whole businesses right out of there. And this was a blessing to them. And that's one reason why I've talked so much about the Colombians and the possibility that they might. And that's why I brought up the topic of the Argentinians. When they came up to take a look at Panama as a trading partner and everything, I was always a little surprised. Why? They normally don't have a lot of involvement with us. And they don't use the canal to speak of because they can, right around the southern tip of the South America and off to the Pacific. They don't need to go through the canal. And if they're running up to Europe, well, why would they go through the canal? They're already on the Atlantic side. So the result is that there's almost no activity from Argentine ships going through the zone. So I was interested in that. But they actually spent a day at the zone itself. And I thought, aha, Argentina's going through a very difficult time. Maybe, just maybe, some of these folks are thinking, if I have to and things get difficult in Argentina and I fear that my money or my safety or whatever is in danger, maybe I can do what the Venezuelans did and set up my business up here and run it from Panama until such time as Argentina gets itself straightened out or one thing or another. I don't know, but ever since that worked out well for at least some Venezuelan companies, these guys pass the messages around with each other. These folks are looking for safe havens. It's possible, all right? It's just possible. So I thought that we have all the facilities here to set up a tech hub and this incredible connection with the internet itself. I mean, any speed you want, you can pretty much get, and you have to pay for it, but not as much as you would have to pay somewhere, say 500 or 1,000 miles off the main branch. So there's a lot of reality. What happened is just a little while ago, a matter of days ago, was the announcement that a hub, was a data center hub, was being set up at the Free Trade Zone. And it's going to be a major affair. These data center hubs are spread all around the world, and they're masses of machines, basically computers that maintain a great deal of internet activity. I can leave it at that, but it's important, and it draws in a type of personnel and a type of interest. It really establishes us and makes good use of our connections with the internet. It's a big plus. And so I'm sitting around thinking about this, and here somebody else is doing it. This is one of the things now in Panama is that just as you start to have a good idea, somebody else already has it. And they're way out in front of you. And it's a good thing because I did not have the money or whatever else that would be necessary to actually do it. I would have had to talk it up with people. But now that's happening. Now, more recently than that, in just the last few days, the Secretary of Commerce in the United States is down and says that Panama is one of 7 countries that have been chosen to be a center for chip creation. You know, the computer chips that everyone's always talking about not having enough of and everything else. Well, the U.S. is attempting to reduce the supply chain by making more of them in the United States, but also at friendly nations and allies in the region that are what's called near-shoring, which means it's not in your nation, but it's very close to it. And this is where they would do it. At least one of the countries in which they would do it. We were number 1 on the list. They came down. And it's not going to happen overnight, but what they're due first is a study of everything that we've got here, what's available, and the number of firms have already expressed an interest in being involved. Then there would be bringing people in to see the local talents who we have people here who can work with something like this, are willing to, and what training they're going to need, because the idea is to train Panamanians to go in and take these jobs and do this. This is not just to give foreigners jobs. This is to create this sort of community of tech workers right here in Panama, made of Panamanians. I mean, that's wonderful. That's great that we're doing that. And in return for that, of course, the U.S. wants a supply of these chips to regularize and to begin to allow them to assure the supply when they need it. I think it's a great idea, and it's a great idea for Panama. It'll take a couple of years before we get to a point where I think they'll be really training people. Well, who knows? It could be a year. You never know. So we'll see how that develops. but that's another big step up. So the reason I bring these things is that they add to the momentum the country already has. And we're already moving faster than any of the other countries. We have been for some years. We really look to ourselves more and more for our own inspiration. I always say the canal is our inspiration for how to run a business. As for other countries, of course, it's Singapore. Now we're looking, as usual, this is not the first time. We look to the Dutch and the Netherlands because of the water situation. Everything that has to do with water, basically. They know canals too. And we've got major projects underway to assure potable water supply and sufficient water for the canal. A lot is written in the press that makes it sound like we're in horrible, terrible trouble and awful things are going to happen. We've known about this for a long time. The studies have been underway for quite a while. And now they're in the process of being implemented, and some of them are going to impact areas that are of interest to me, and I just think it's wonderful. So we've got all this going on. It means the country's got some more stability, and it really pays, not only in terms of money, but in encouraging us not only to increase our technical skills, but to also maintain this reputation we have for stability, security, and moving forward and being reasonable and working with business, not against business. That's what it's been about all these last couple of decades, and the dramatic growth where we just walked right past so many countries who are still not sure how it happened, but we know, and we're continuing to do it. So this is all of these are good signs, and they're good signs for residents. Not so many years ago, Ecuador was the place to go for a lot of groups. They talked about that, and the housing was cheaper there, etc. I always said, there are reasons why housing is cheaper, and you need to know and understand the society itself, because you're buying into a package. You're not just buying a house on the beach or anything of this sort. You're buying into a package, into a life, or if you like a lifestyle or whatever, into a national situation. Businesses understand this. So before they come to Panama, and I've seen and spoken to them, teams who have come through over these years, they do an incredibly detailed job of research before they make up their minds. And Panama's been doing extremely well in this regard for years, and that is why we have so many businesses here, for international businesses that I think 180 something now under this one set of legislation, and then there are others under different, whatever. It's big. And it means that our leadership at least has had some shaky moments, as I've mentioned and spoken about. But basically speaking, the country itself and its business sector and most of its government sector has been moving steadily in a good direction. And in comparison to the rest of Latin America, we are way out in front. So it's really hard to make a case for another country under these circumstances. We can blow it, for sure. And somebody else can get their act together and really put something together, but we don't see anything likely for that anytime really soon. But we don't care. And that's the wonderful part. We don't compete with anybody. We build. I mean, this is one of the things that's most unusual about Panama. In my experience working with smaller countries, they tend to always compare themselves to other countries and their size and their neighborhood and what have you. We don't bother because we're different. And that canal represents the difference, but it also is the much expanded canal. It's our canal, so to speak. It's Panama's canal in the real sense now. And this country is a young country. It only gained complete control of its own territory in 2000. And prior to that, a foreign power had basically one military base after another, a strip right down the middle, which included the canal itself. And that issue is long gone. I mean, this is fine. We are very friendly, let's put it that way, with the Americans. In fact, the canal people from the old days are invited down. From the Army Corps of Engineers, and we have not only invited them, we paid that they come down and provide us with some support, backup, as we're looking at what we have to do now to deal with the changing of the climate, and it is definitely happening here, and we're having to deal with it, and that's all there is to it. And nobody argues about it, they just get to work, and we're looking at how we're going to deal with it, which is why you read articles in things like the New York Times or the Bloomberg or one or another, which I read too, about concern about what's going to happen in the future. Well, we're there, we know. So we're working on it, so don't worry too much. Nobody has any real full-time representation down here, let me tell you. We're too small a country. We don't generate enough news. We don't have riots. We don't kill people. We don't have civil wars going on. We have our corruption scandals, sure. Believe me, we're not alone in that regard in this region or anywhere in the world for that matter. But this is a peaceful and stable society, and it's very pro-business. And it's hard to find those. It's hard to find those sometimes in a world that's well, let's just say, complicated as this one has made its own life to be. So that's a rather clumsy way of saying we make our own futures, and so does Panama. And I think we're doing all right here. So that was another thing I'd like to share that I normally don't even think of mentioning, and it's part of the package that you buy into. And if you want to ignore all the package and you just want to think in terms of the price of the house or whatever, and ignore all the other things because it makes you uncomfortable, well, all right, but it's a gamble, and it's yours to gamble. I mean, it's your life. If that's right for you, you must do that. You should do that, and I would encourage you to do that. And it may be that you have done an outstanding job of research. It's fine. Don't worry about it. I don't care. I've said this so many times. I don't care whether you come to Panama or not. It's not important to me. It's important to you, and you need to go where you need to go, and you've got to make that decision, and Bob Adams can't make it for you, and I know that. So I know that if you want to come here, you've decided this is it, by all means come. I'd love to know that you were arriving. But if it's not for you, you come, you say, nope, this is not for me, fine. I have occasionally get these sarcastic notes from people saying, well, Bob, we don't like this place, we're going home, so forth. And I try to always write a pleasant note, and I think I do pretty well, and just say, well, congratulations. I mean, that's wonderful. You have found what it is you don't want here, and you have a reason not to. Now you know a better shot at getting what you want because you have been through this already. And you get to see the canal in the process. So think of it as a valuable experience for you, and I, for one, am very pleased to know that you're now headed in a direction that's going to get you to where you need to go, and not where anyone else thinks you should go. That and basically how I want to approach it because it's true. Well, surprise, here I am in a different color shirt. The video was done yesterday. I had a major problem with it. And finally today I just took a portion, which you saw, and clipped off the end, stuck this on, and putting it up. I have a couple more that I'm planning to get up as soon as I can. One of those is going to be the famous or infamous food video. But yeah, it's pesky, and I'm just going to have to do it and be done with it. The other is an answer to a question I get asked a lot, and in 20 years I've never really discussed it because it's not material to what I'm trying to do here. But that's what I do otherwise in Panama, because I'm not retired in the traditional sense. And I'm not planning anything real fancy or anything of this sort. More of a general description of what interests me and so on, because as I say, this is meant for you. This channel is meant for you, not for me. Any event, that's it, and thank you for your patience. Again, it's getting pretty common, isn't it? And I am working on that newsletter by Gummy, so I will be back to you, I hope, soon.